Welcome to The Strategic Edge, the podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners who want a competitive edge in the market. They want to be seen as the expert in their industry, and they're looking for cutting edge and innovative strategies that work across industries to help them scale their business like a boss. My name is Carden, and I'm your host. Welcome to the show. Hey everyone, it's Carden, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of The Strategic Edge. And today I have with me Matt Havens, who told me he has rode a camel across the Sahara. He told me he climbed Mount Everest, and then he said, no, not really. So that should give you some insight into what he is all about. I think we're going to have such a fun interview. I'm super excited. We had a little bit of conversation before we got started, and I know this is going to be massive value for you guys, but you're going to have fun listening. So Matt, welcome to my show.
Thank you for having me. And can I tell you a quick story about that sort of introduction? So
sure. Yes.
When my main profession is to go out to large audiences and speak, and obviously that's looking different with COVID, but there was a presentation I was about to do and go out and speak. And the guy who's going to introduce me 5 seconds before comes up and says, "Hey, I don't really like your introduction. Do you mind if I just make it up?" And I had a pretty standard introduction at that point. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. Cause I'm pretty free flowing. It's like, whatever. So he goes up and he starts saying all these outlandish things about me and how we knew each other in high school. And the reaction that we got from the audience was so good. I was like, oh, I'm stealing that. So now every time I do an event, I try to encourage the person to make up more stuff so I can change it. But the camel one's a lot of fun. People always ask me if I rode a camel, and I haven't. So I just like tricking people, I guess.
Wow. I love it. So have you ever skydived?
I have. I've been skydiving 5 times, but it's been about 10 or 15 years since then.
Yeah, I did it in Dallas for the first time a couple years ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I went with my son. It was a blast. And he asked me not too long ago, "And Mom, are you ready to skydive again?" And I said, yeah, I think I am. I think I'm ready to do that again. So with COVID, I don't know, if that's a possibility, but no. So I was curious because you're in Dallas. So that's why I wondered. But we're going to talk about business and fun. So, what cool things have you done, Matt? If you haven't really climbed Mount Everest and you haven't, you didn't ride a camel across the Sahara, what cool things have you done?
I would say other than the fake things that I haven't done, it's a pretty normal, standard life. My wife and I, we like to travel a lot. So I think, we've seen some fun parts of the country and of the world. Mm-hmm. I've got young kids, so seeing things through their eyes is always...
Oh, wait, he's got twins.
I do. Yes. I do. Yes. And that's all we have, because after you have 2 kids at once, you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is crazy. But I know your son has, or your daughter has triplets. So
yes, I'm a grandmother of triplets, 4-year-old triplets.
Yeah, that's a whole new game that I wouldn't be prepared for.
Oh, so. It's wonderful. Awesome. So Matt, tell everybody what you do. You mentioned it a little bit, but go into more detail. Tell everyone what you do and really kind of how you got into what it is you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm a keynote speaker. I'm a sort of a leadership coach as well. And what that means is, generally speaking, I'm going to go work with companies or associations at their annual events, maybe a leadership meeting. And generally, I'm asked to come and talk about 2 different topics. One is this whole generational thing of millennials versus baby boomers and how we work together.
Oh, I want to dig into that too.
I would love to. And then also just sort of leadership and what it takes to be a successful leader, especially in today's world, because that's ever changing. And so that's been my business for about 5 years. Before that, I was in a corporate leadership role for a Fortune 50 company, did that for about 13 years. And actually, there's a little bit of overlap there. I kind of started speaking when I was still with that company. And then I went full-time speaking in 2019. So that's my business. It's certainly changing and adapting with COVID, but I just like getting in front of people, sharing a message, and helping them kind of maybe see the other side of the coin and of the argument.
I love it. So, speaking, it seems so glamorous to people. And I am, someone who's done a lot of speaking through the years too. And it always seems very, very glamorous. But I think people need to realize when you do it for a living, and that is your main core, business, there are some downsides with that as well, right? I mean,
Absolutely,
you might love to travel, but we know that travel isn't always perfect.
correct.
So tell us some good stories about some of your travels as a speaker.
Yeah, so I kind of love that you say that too, because also many people don't understand that it's a profession,
Right.
that it's a way to make income for your family and to have a career.
Yes.
So especially somebody who is in a corporate environment where, if I had to stereotype it, right, it's safe to work for a company, and it feels like secure and all those types of things. For me to say, hey, I'm going to leave and I'm going to go out and speak for a living, people are like, what, are you crazy? Like, what is that? Can you even
Do you
do
even
that?
make any money doing that?
Yeah. Can you even make any money doing that? So, that in and of itself is interesting. I kind of got turned on to speaking because it's a weird family business in a way. My father, who's in his 60s now, he did what most corporate lawyers do in their 40s. He quit his job to be a stand-up comedian. And so, I saw kind of him go through that when I was pretty young in my life.
Wow.
My oldest brother started off as a high school teacher, and then he got into comedy and public speaking. So I always knew that it was this career and opportunity. And so that's kind of what always piqued my interest into it. Now, but to get to your actual question about sort of like, what is it like? The travels is certainly one of the things that is different right now, but before it can be a little wild if you're traveling from city to city to go speak, and you're working with your clients beforehand to make sure that your message is going to resonate. You're spending a lot of time talking to yourself. I mean, I feel bad for my neighbors sometimes because when they see me walking around the neighborhood and I'm talking to myself, I look crazy. I actually put my ear pods in just so people think that maybe I'm on a conference call, but really I'm just walking around talking to myself.
That's funny.
And I've certainly had the weird sort of travels where, planes get delayed and, the event's not going to wait for you. So you have to be there on time. And those can always be a little challenging. But, I always say it's a weird way to make a living, but it's a ton of fun to get to talk to so many people from different industries and backgrounds and really try to help them in their business and do it in an entertaining way.
Yeah, no, I love it. And actually, I mean, that really is kind of the purpose of my podcast too. And I kind of shared that with you. I started this because, wow, what a great way to get to know people and meet people and socialize and still give back and share. And so I love that. So what's the worst story you can tell us about a speaking experience? Because we all have those. I shared one actually on a podcast a couple of days ago with my guest who was also in the speaker industry, and I shared a kind of a horror story of when I spoke one time. But let's hear yours.
Well, see, now I'm curious. So now we gotta come back to that.
I can't repeat it on the podcast because I already did it on the podcast. So I have to tell you.
Well, I'll have to go and listen to that one because I don't even know if my examples are going to be like horrible stories or anything like that. The thing that I always that you might look back and say, okay, well, that was different is, certainly the size of an audience is very different for how your message is going to land.
Yeah.
Especially for somebody that tries to bring a lot of humor and engagement and laughter into it. When you have 700 people that you're speaking to, you only have to make 100 of them laugh for it to be really funny and really loud and get other people laughing. But some of the tougher jobs I've had might have been the group of 8 people at 7 a.m. When you're trying to get them energized and laughing. And even if you get half of them to laugh, it's still not very loud. It doesn't really create that cascading effect. So I've had a few of those. But the one that for whatever reason is sticking out to my mind is I did a job up in Timmins, Ontario, which actually, I don't know why, but I actually have right here the coaster that they gave me. And if you've ever looked up Timmins, it's very far up there. So it's the middle of the winter. I fly into Toronto. I then have to take basically a puddle jumper up to the airport that's in Timmins. We are the last flight that shows up that night. Everything's dark. It's snowing like crazy. And I think I got in around 12:30 at night to then be speaking at 8 o'clock in the morning the next day. and there's no hotel vacancy. Something happened with the reservation. I don't have a place to sleep now. I eventually had to go to a town farther away to finally find a place to sleep at about 4 a.m. to turn around at 6 a.m., get up, get back to the place.
Oh my gosh. And try to look presentable and
try to look together and be funny and, create some energy in the room. So, that kind of comes to mind as one of those, well, that wasn't the most fun day of work. Yeah. But in fairness to the folks of Timmins, Ontario, in case they're listening to this, they were wonderful people. Mm-hmm. They were very accommodating and had a good time. And
you were probably able to put a spin on that. And it probably became part of your whole presentation. And once you were through that, right?
Well, I mean, I guess my belief is like at the end of the day, this is what I love doing. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing that you love doing in life, whether you're a business owner or a parent, where every day is going to be perfect.
Right.
But I still love the fact that I get to get in front of people and share a message that I think is super important. And luckily, I think other people tend to think that it's an important topic we need to talk about. So at the end of the day, I'll take the bad days that come with it.
I love that. One of the things I have to say, though, about that whole experience is that was probably a lot easier for a guy to pull off than a woman. We have to fix our hair, and we have to put on makeup.
That is probably. I can just
run that would have never worked.
I can run it under a sink and throw a few things in it, and we're good to go.
And as long as you don't get too close to people, and they can't, they can't smell you, it's all good, right? But a woman cannot pull that off. I would have been devastated probably. So
I never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Right. So let's talk. So we talked about, that there is good and bad, and this is business, right? When you're doing this is your business. Business is not always rosy, and it doesn't always smell good, and it doesn't always turn out the way you want it to turn out. But you have to roll with it. You have to be resilient, and you have to say, just like you said, at the end of the day, I love this, and it's not going to change. I have to take the good and the bad. And I think a lot of people don't think like that. They think everything's always going to be perfect.
Well, and I think regardless of the role, regardless of the business you're running or the industry you're in, I think people have to take notice of like, what are the things I'm going to have to do that I don't necessarily love? Mm-hmm. Right. And is that worth what it is going to take to be able to do the other parts that I really, really love? Mm-hmm. So in the speaking world, I'll give you an example that a lot of people say, hey, I would want to get up on stage and I want to speak, but they probably also don't realize how much time you have to spend writing and how much time you have to write articles to go out and market your ideas. And it was actually one of the things that my brother, being in the industry before, as I'm working this corporate job, and there's parts of it I love, there's parts I really didn't like. Mm-hmm. And I start thinking, okay, maybe I want to go into speaking. That was one of the biggest cautions he ever gave me is, hey, I know you're going to do great on stage. I know you love that part, but when this is your full-time job, I hope you realize how much time you're going to spend writing, thinking, trying to organize your thoughts in a way that it will bring value to an audience. And some people don't necessarily think about like, what are those parts I don't want to do? And if you have to weigh those pros and cons of it to recognize whether or not you're willing to put in the effort to get to do the thing that you always, always love. Because I know that there's some people that out there say that, you can create a business and things where it's only doing the things you love. I would probably challenge that thought a little bit. I certainly hope that you do more of the things you love than anything, but I think there's going to be some times where you're going to have to put in some work and do some things that aren't your number one priority and favorite thing in the world.
Oh my goodness, you bring up some really, really great points. I would love to elaborate on this a little bit, because one of the things when you're starting your business, you have to do practically everything, right? Everything. Unless you have funding, unless you have money where you have to hire people, where you can hire people, you have to bootstrap. And for people to not realize that, when you get to a certain place in your business, a certain level in your business, you will be able to hire other people to help you with a lot of the stuff that you just maybe don't want to do. But it takes a while to get to that place. I see this with coaches and consultants all the time. I work with a lot of consultants and coaches, and they don't realize how much marketing of themselves they are going to have to do. How much they're going to have to build their brand and elevate and make connections and build partnerships. And if they're trying to do it part-time, they typically don't do it it's not going to really go anywhere for them. Unless, like I said, they have a lot of funds to hire a big team right out of the gate. And people don't realize this. I always say 90% of your time is going to be spent on the back end stuff that people don't see, right?
And I love how you said it. It's the things that people don't see.
Right.
And if you're entering into a business that maybe you don't have a ton of experience in, but you're certainly passionate about it, I would encourage everybody to go figure out what are those things in the background that you don't see that you're going to need to do, especially like you mentioned early on.
Yes.
You're going to have to get really ingrained into this until hopefully you build your business, you get to a point where, yes, then maybe you can outsource some of those things that you don't want to do. Or in some cases, you can just say, you know what, I'm not going to do them. I realize that I could do this if I want to maybe build a business bigger, but it's not worth it to me. And I'm not going to even hire somebody to do it.
Right.
That's another option that sometimes people just got to be comfortable with.
It absolutely is. And I think, different strokes for different folks, right?
Yeah.
That's an old saying, but
there's a lot. I use throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I use that one. I use that a lot.
Why are we throwing babies? It's a horrible idea. It's just illegal, I think. So
yeah. Do you know where that came from?
I do. I just like to make the joke about it.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I actually use that one too. That's always funny. And people are like, what?
I've got a little slide I use that's like, it's just a baby. Nobody's throwing it, thankfully. But you get like a few people like, wait, what? I don't know that phrase. Or it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. It is kind of weird actually, but no, you bring up some really good points, to really figure out, okay, what are all the moving parts here that I'm going to have to do? And it doesn't matter what kind of business it is. And I will say this too, that even with every different stage of growth, because I work with people in a lot of different levels in their business, and even with every stage of growth, now there's new things they have to learn, new things they have to do. So a good example of this would be a small business owner who now is all of a sudden his business is, I say he, but their business has grown to a place where now they've got to start building a team, and and now they have to step into a leadership role. They have to step out of doing the thing that they're so great at. Like they have to change their skill set. And so many people don't realize this. And I always say, look, if you're just looking to make an income and you're not willing to step into a CEO role, and, you might just want to consider, and I'm not talking about speakers or people where the profitability is high, but think about like a contractor. Okay. If you're only going to do the thing and you don't want to run a business, you don't want to do the things or learn the things that are required to run a business, you ought to probably go work for someone else, because you're going to be back there anyway. Like you can't say, I don't want to learn this. I don't want to do this. At the end of the day, it's all part of building a business.
It is. And I would say like that example, I see that a lot. Granted, I do have a corporate background, so I have a experience there that I probably
see something different, right?
But I think you see that a lot in corporate environments or larger, 100+ type businesses where you've got a lot of people who are really, really good at a task or a skill. And then because they're really good at that, we elevate them into a formal leadership role where now they have teams and people behind them. And we wonder why occasionally they might struggle.
Right.
And oftentimes, I mean, probably the vast majority of times, the reason is because they're still trying to do that skill or task really good.
Like an employee or like
an employee. And we need them to be a leader, and we need them to think about how do we grow the people that are now part of our team. And it's a different skill set. It's easy to kind of figure out, but we have to kind of
letting go of control. That's a big one. Letting go of that control. Yes.
Absolutely.
No, you're right. They're very different skill sets, being a leader and doing the thing. For sure.
Doing the thing and being a leader. I like that. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to dig into that you kind of mentioned at the very beginning is the difference in millennials or the generational differences. And it sounds like you have a whole presentation. So here is your platform. Let's see you do it. Well, I want to talk about this. It's a big one, I think, for people.
It is. And let me back up just a little bit, because this is the part that I think is really funny and interesting about this is back in my corporate career, this would have been like 2006, 2007. I was working in kind of like an entry level type position at this organization, and I did what a lot of millennials do: is I didn't have any filter on what I said. I said exactly what I thought in the moment, and I happened to do that with somebody who was pretty high up at the company. And I was saying, here's everything that we're doing wrong from a millennial standpoint. We're not attracting the right people. We're not attracting any millennials at all. And our commercials are bad. We need, it was probably unprofessional. But long story short, I ended up working with that company and a couple other people on a smaller team to try to modernize the workforce, how we thought about younger people as consumers and as employees. And it was the best experience that I had in my corporate experience. That was 13 years ago. And we are still, as a society, dealing with this issue of millennials and now Gen Z. And so I just find it interesting that, like, how have we not figured this thing out yet? But I think the reason we haven't, and what I kind of get up and I talk on stages about, and I try to work with people to understand, is that we are still trying to shove people into boxes.
Yes.
We're still trying to say that because somebody's a baby boomer, they think this way. And because somebody's a millennial, they think this way, when that couldn't be farther from the truth. My message is about trying to understand why people act a certain way. And I got a newsflash for you. There's some baby boomers that have more millennial tendencies than millennials, and vice versa, right? But if we can understand why, and my argument is, it's because they grew up with the internet. It's because they grew up with 500 channels of TV. That's changed how we find community. It's changed how we think about the world. And quite frankly, if we had a little more empathy to understand that everybody would be the exact same way if this is what they had to grow up with,
yes,
then we can actually figure out how we can solve and look at today's challenges with a different lens. So that's kind of my message: is stop putting people in boxes. Don't worry if they're a millennial or baby boomer or Gen Z, but maybe understand.
Look, we all have something to bring to the party.
Yeah, exactly.
We all do. Yeah. But you're right. It's almost like this invisible wall that separates the different generations. And I see this too. It's kind of, I remember talking to somebody who was doing some marketing for me, and I said, I don't know, like targeting millennials, I just don't think they're my ideal clients. And he said, well, why do you think that? I said, because I don't think they want to learn from an old person. And technology wise, they're way ahead of where I am, right? And so they just have this different mindset about things. And one of the things that I always say about me is I bring kind of the old school with the new stuff, because I've done it both ways, right? But there's still sometimes it feels like a little bit of a separation there.
Well, and I think there is pockets of separation in those things. But, I would argue that, and one of my messages to the young people is, we have to work with the older people for their experience and what they know, and the reasons that we're doing things today. The reasons we're doing things the way we are today is because they're the best ideas that we've had up until this point forever. So it doesn't mean things don't need to change, but it does mean that's probably where we should start and figure out, okay, well, why are these practices and processes in place? Why did we make this decision 3 years ago to market a certain way? Like we can understand those things better and then figure out how we want to move forward in a different way. But like the funniest thing for me is when we look at somebody demographically or physically, and we immediately make those snap judgments that, like, oh, well, you're a millennial, so you love social media and you probably have an iPhone that you are on 18 hours a day. And then when we start like digging in and actually having conversations with people, we'll find out that there's some millennials that have no social media and they don't even carry a phone because they've watched The Social Network and they know what it's doing to us. Like there's so it's just that's the sort of the thing I try to impress upon people is we're all in this together. If we can understand why people act, then we can apply that lens to work.
So dig a little deeper. And the thing is, you're right. You can't put everybody in a box anyway, because everybody doesn't fit that mold.
So my favorite example that this happens 70% of the time that I speak is, I'll talk about this message of, well, here's why people are this way. And hey, you'd be the same way if you grew up like this. And here's how we work together. Here's some strategies. And then somebody will come up and say, all right, I like what you said and I agree with it, but I've got this one kid that's, on my team and never shows up to work on time, always on his phone, this, that, or the other. And they're like, how do I deal with millennials in that way? You don't have to deal with millennials. You have a bad employee. That's not a generational
I was going to
thing.
say, where is that a good employee?
Yeah, you have a bad employee, so maybe they shouldn't work for you or on your team. That's not a generational issue. That's just an issue of like how to be professional, okay?
Yes.
So it's just the mixing of those things that we have to be careful of and just, recognize when maybe you've got just somebody that either doesn't know
not
some
that they're a
information.
millennial, right?
Yeah, it's not that they're millennial. They're just they don't know, or they didn't have the teaching or upbringing or whatever it may be.
No, I think, oh my goodness, that's really a very valid point, and that's really something that people can take away from this too, because it isn't. You have to build your culture, you have to build your team, you have to build your employees. They have to be the people that are going to be right for your business. And a good example of this is not too long ago, I was having a conversation with someone who is a brilliant coaching consultant. He's been around for umpteen years. And we were having the conversation about bad language. And, I don't want to say a lot of millennials, but there's no filter a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't grow up that way. I grew up, that you have to be professional, and it's just, you don't just use that kind of language anywhere and everywhere, and it's not professional to use it. And so those were sort of my what I learned and my belief system, right? And so we were having this conversation about this. And so I think what we said to that point is, look, if that language doesn't fit your culture, then you have to be the leader, and you have to make sure that that's either people really know that, or you don't hire them if they can't fit in with what it is you expect your company to be. When you own a company, it's your reputation. You're going to make or break that company, right? So you have to make sure that you bring the right people in that do fit your culture. But then there's other cultures where that's not a big deal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
surfboards, it's not going to happen.
Exactly, right. And so there's two things that kind of come to mind with that. And the first is whether it's language, whether, working from home, whatever the issue is. The challenge I often try to work with leaders on is understanding, to your point, is that a part of your culture? But more importantly, if it's not, how important is it to your culture? So, because the reality is it may not be important. And if it's not important, then why is it an issue? So I'll give you an example that I had in my corporate experiences. I used to work with the senior executive team on outside research. So it was a very, very much a job where you're working at your desk, you're researching information, you're writing papers and articles so that they can disseminate, and you're going to meet with them to talk about, hey, you need to be thinking about this. So I used to work out in this corporate atrium we had. I didn't work at my desk. I worked out there because, surprise, surprise, people walk around. It looks more appealing. There's people that will stop and talk to you, and you can have human interaction, which is a good thing for employees to have. And I found out from my boss at the time that there was many people who didn't like that. They didn't like that I sat out there to do my work. And it was, I credit him for having the right insight and thought into it, because I got very angry at the time. I was like, his name is Tony. I said, Tony, am I getting my work done? Absolutely. I was like, am I doing a good job? Am I doing what you need? Absolutely. And he stopped me. He goes, and you don't need to worry about that at all, because I'm helping them understand that you're doing everything you need to do, and where you sit doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you sit in the office. And so there's a change that has to happen in people's mentality. But the question I would have asked those people is, does it matter where I sit? And why? If it does, tell me why. Let's talk about this. And I think if we do that in some situations, we'll find out that it doesn't impact the culture. And if it does, then certainly, like you said, we got to step up and have that conversation, because maybe people just don't know.
No, those are really, really valid points too. And it really does matter, who your clients or customers are, what sort of I guess probably the easiest way to say it would be, okay, maybe it's a Christian organization or there's a Christian foundation. That wouldn't be appropriate, right? It would
Absolutely.
hurt, it would hurt things. And so I
Absolutely.
think that, there are certain situations where it wouldn't be appropriate. So yeah, I think you're right. You have to dig in and you really have to say, that's such a great point. Will this hurt things or will it not? Or is it just my idea of, I don't want it this way?
Yeah, I think so. In the example you gave right there, right, with the Christian organization, absolutely, you're not going to curse, and that wouldn't fit the culture. But I think too often, business owners, leaders, organizations, they put up this is the way we do it, and haven't really given it a thought to say, all right, how does this impact business, or does it at all? And so instead of just saying, oh, well, this is how we've always done it, we've got to recognize that, okay, well, yeah, maybe things are looking a little bit differently. The other thing I was going to say too is because of the internet and what we're experiencing today, this is another message I kind of try to share with people is we are really, really starting to blur the lines between work and life, like work and personal life. And sometimes it's the work environment that isn't quite ready to accept the fact that those lines are blurring, because we used to, as employees or leaders, it used to be you clock out at 4:30, you go home, you don't talk to the people at work because that's work, and here's my personal life over here. But that's not happening as much anymore. In fact, I don't think that line really exists. So we're going to start seeing some of these things that happen in our personal lives. And I'm just going to use the cursing as an example. If these people curse with their friends and their family, and that's who they are, of course it's going to come into work.
Yeah.
And we have to, now again, because of the culture, we got to make sure we have those conversations. But it's just that those lines are blurring so much, and leaders and organizations, you have to kind of recognize that when you're hiring, when you're setting expectations, when you're talking about and building culture, you have to recognize that work and personal life is blurring.
Right. And this is where it really is important to really dial in. Who do you want to work for your company? Who do you want to work for your business? Who do you want to represent you? Those are important things to really think about and know, and not just hire somebody because they're a warm body and they fill the role, because, employee turnover and all of that is one of the highest expenses in a company and in a business. And so you've got to get super, super clear on that. But, and I know I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, and I didn't mean to, and the language thing was the one thing I could think of off the top of my head that we could use as an example. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is, having the right people in the right seats on the bus and being the people that are going to represent the company well, or, I'm sure that there would be certain speaking engagements that maybe you wouldn't feel super comfortable with who you are as a person to go and speak, because it wouldn't align, or it wouldn't feel good to you, or it wouldn't, so that's all kind of part of it too.
There's alignment in every business, right?
Yes.
You can, as a speaker, there's certainly some situations where it's like, I don't know if that's in alignment with what I do or what I'm about. There have been client calls, not because of any type of organization or anything like that, but there's been calls where somebody's like, hey, can you talk about manufacturing of equipment? No. That's not at all in alignment with what I do. Now, I could talk about generational differences to a group of manufacturing clients. Absolutely. But, it's in those moments where you're like, hey, you know what? This isn't in alignment with me. Here's somebody else that might be in alignment with that. Let me get you connected with them. And, so every business, you got to figure out where the alignment is. But
yes, no, good stuff. Good stuff. Oh my gosh, we could talk forever. I'm looking at the time here and I'm like, have we been talking this long already?
Yeah. Wow.
We have. I know. So this has been absolutely great. So Matt, leave us with something great, a big takeaway for people. I know we've shared so much here, and there's been a lot of gold, but give us the good strategy or something to take away here.
Well, one of the things that I would say I've been thinking a lot about lately, and it's is, we're in definitely some trying times across the board for business owners, for individuals, for parents trying to learn how to homeschool. And in case people are listening to this 3 hours later, we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic, so life is very different right now. But what I always say, and kind of one of the main things you'll see if you kind of look me up, is at the end of the day, we are all human.
Yes.
And too often in business, in leadership, in our relationships, I think sometimes we try to focus more on the differences that we have, and not focus enough on the similarities that we have as humans.
Oh,
so, and you see it, right? The generational thing, it's millennials versus baby boomers. It's men versus women. It's your election preferences, Republicans versus Democrats, right? We try to focus on what makes people different. But the reality is how we move forward as society and as leaders and in business is focus on the similarities that we have. And if we look for those more, I got news for you. You're going to find them. You're going to find the similarities, and that's going to help you market your business. That's going to help you be a better leader than if you spend all the time focusing on the things that pull us apart. So look for the similarities, look for the gold there, and you'll find what you need.
Great insights, great sharing. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Matt, for being on and sharing your wisdom and showing people what you do. And you have brought out a lot of really, really good things today that I know will be great takeaways for anyone in business, even if they're a professional, whether you're corporate or you're small business or you're just your own brand. Great stuff. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No, it's been a pleasure having you on. So anything else that we're going to put all your links and everything in the show notes so people will be able to reach out to you. But look, if you're interested in having a great speaker who has a great sense of humor and he's so real and he's so down to earth, definitely look Matt up, hire him. I know he does have he works with an agency. He did tell me that. But you can see he's amazing at what he does. So look him up. And until next time, everyone, thank you so much for tuning into another episode, and go rock your business, and God bless you all.